Good evening. This October 17th meeting of the Harbor Commission should come to order, please. Ms. Brzezinski, would you call the roll, please?
Betsy Kramer.
Present.
Bill Spicer.
Here.
Corey Bantolin.
Here.
Eric Friedman. Frank Kelly.
Here.
Jim Sloan.
Here.
Colleen Webb.
Mr. Riedman, are there any changes to the agenda?
Madam Chair, there are no changes this evening.
This would be the point of public comment of anything that's not on the agenda, but since there seems to be none, I will close public comment. And so on to the approval of the minutes.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
They're approved. Department update, Mr. Riedman.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. In terms of council actions, the council authorized the Waterfront Department to execute a contract with URS Corporation in the amount of $85,000 to provide engineering design services for the next 4 phases of the Marina One project. And also authorized the Waterfront Director to approve expenditures up to $8,500 for extra services that might result. I added a section here on upcoming meetings because we've got a busy schedule ahead the next 2 months. First off, we have the Harbor Masters Annual Training Conference up in Aptos, California, which Mick will be attending. We have the California Marine Affairs and Navigation Conference, which I'll be attending in Monterey, November 6th through 8th. We'll learn the latest on our dredging contracts and so forth and where we stand with the federal government at that, hopefully. Additionally, the Marina Recreation Association meeting is being held in Santa Barbara this time on November 12th at Fest Parker's Doubletree. And while we're not directly involved in the meeting, we've organized a tour of the harbor and the wharf and the commercial area for those that are participating in the meeting. So we'll all be introducing everyone to Santa Barbara Harbor and what we do here. And then finally, the Department of Boating and Waterways meeting is being held in Santa Barbara next month at the Hyatt Santa Barbara on November 14th and 15th. They will be considering the next phase of the Marina One loan. So, of course, we'll be there to speak on behalf of our loan, but it would be nice if we had possibly a commissioner or two that could just say a word or two at public comment or at the item in support of the project. And real convenient since it's in town. We don't have to go to Sacramento this time. In November, we're going to bring you a cruise ship update. We'll be done with the cruise ship season for the year. We'll update from CMANC on the dredge funding and update from the DBAW meeting on Marina One loan funding. And that concludes the report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Commissioner Sloan.
During those 2 days, what would be a good time to come to the meeting?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Sloan, I don't have a copy of the agenda yet. So when I get that, I'll forward it to you all and we'll know when the appropriate time is.
Great. Thank you.
And that meeting will be open to the public, right?
Oh, yes.
I'm assuming so, yeah. Okay, thank you. On now to the business report. Mr. Bossy.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Tonight I bring to you, I'm happy to bring to you the October version of the Business Services Report. First item, the Waterfront Department has been issuing business activity permits, or BAP, since 1972. And the BAP program establishes rules and guidelines for those wishing to conduct business in the harbor, yet don't have lease space in the harbor or storage space in the harbor. So what this business activity permit does is it allows folks outside to work within the harbor. And they can do that if they meet 3 requirements, 3 relatively simple requirements. One is they must have an official City of Santa Barbara business license. The second is they must obtain commercial liability insurance commensurate with the activities they're conducting. And we've provided a chart for you in your staff report, and it varies anywhere from $300,000 in commercial liability insurance up to $1 million in liability insurance for our 6-pack charters. Now, if those requirements are met and they receive approval from the department itself, they are provided with a BAP identification card, which is another identifier that folks can, if they see that, they know these folks have passed a certain level of criteria to work within the harbor. We also put up a list of the active BAP holders on the city's website, and we also have those available for you or for the public at our offices. Now, currently there are 65 BAP holders allowed to work within the harbor. Over the last 4 years, we've averaged about 67, so we're a few off, but it varies from year to year according to who's in town and who's not. Some people move on. We get some new people as well. But the BA program really provides, I think the gist of the program is it provides peace of mind for boat owners, slip holders, and folks visiting the Santa Barbara Harbor to know that they can work with people who have the appropriate credentials and are authorized to work within the harbor. So it really is a peace of mind thing. It protects the boaters, the slip holders, anybody who's got that work going on, as well as the department itself. Now, at last month's Harbor Commission meeting, the commission asked about the number and type of slip transfers that have been occurring within the harbor and how much revenue that generates. So what we've done for you this month is this first slide represents the first quarter of fiscal year 2014. And as you can see on the left, we have slip length, we have the vessel billing length, and then we have three columns that represent what kind of a transfer it was. Either new boat or a new partner was added, a vessel was sold or there are new permittees, or it was the same boat but has new partners added, as well as the total fee for that transfer. Now, for the first quarter, we've had 13 transfers, and broken down, it's 7 of those are under the 30-foot range, and then 6 of those are above the 30-foot range. So it pretty much splits it down the middle. Compared to fiscal year 2013, we had 16 slip transfers for a total of $181,000 versus this year's $131,000. So that's a difference of roughly $50,000. And the primary difference there is last year there were actually 3 40-foot slip transfers and 1 additional 35-foot transfer, which, doing the math, adds up to that $50,000 difference. So we're roughly on target for our average over the last 5 years has been about 54 slip transfers. And here is an example of our 5-year slip transfer summary, going all the way back to fiscal year 2009, also divided into the 3 categories I just discussed. I've also included on that, close to the bottom, our first quarter results, those 13 as well. So as you can see here, the overwhelming majority, or a good majority of those, have been new boat owners or new partners added to a boat. Next is the vessels has been sold or there are new permittees. And third on the list, 22, is the same boat or new partners have been added. And over those 5.25 years, the revenue generated has been almost $2.7 million. So I hope that answers any questions that you may have regarding our slip transfer activity. And if so, I can move on, or you can always get me later with the question. Next, I have a parking permit update. Again, also last meeting, commissioners asked about parking permits in the harbor, and if they've gone up or down, what's been the fluctuation over the past few years. So what we've done is we've gone back the last, 5 fiscal years, from 2009 on, and we put together how many permits were sold. We split those out into blue, which, as you know, you get one of those as a permit holder, or slip holder, 1 per slip, and then red are open to the general public. So as you can see from this chart, the blue, interestingly, have actually slowly decreased over the 5-year span at a high of 822 in 2009. And last year, fiscal year 2013, they were down to 700, which was significantly lower than the average, which is 771. As far as our red permits, again, permits open to the public, we've gone the opposite way, from a low of just below 3,200 up to almost 3,800 last fiscal year. So on average, we sell about 4,315 total parking permits on any given year, or at least throughout the last 5 fiscal years. And you can see the averages of the blue at 771 and red at a little over 3,500 total parking permits. So if you have any questions on parking permits, I'd be happy to answer those now.
Thank you very much for the report, and thank you for being responsive to our questions. Oh, okay.
I know you have another section here, but what do you attribute the drop in the blues to? The number of slips hasn't changed.
No, and that's the interesting thing. And I've thought about this. The number of slips hasn't changed. We're still full, and yet the number of blue permits has changed. One possible reason for a part of it, or maybe that more people have. Singular people are acquiring more slips. They have more boats. Maybe they just need one permit. That could be one, but that would be a very small amount of people. So I can't. I don't have an idea. Maybe Mr. Reedman might have an idea, or Mr. Cromman, but I do not.
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioner Sloan, the only other thing I could think of is yacht club membership, because they get to use the yacht club parking lot. And as you know, we have some 1,139 slips in the harbor, and we don't sell nearly that many blue permits. So I attribute the rest of that probably to the yacht club. That would be my first guess.
Okay, thanks.
And lastly, on tonight's business services report is an update on our Luke self-pay parking systems. In April of this year, the final 5 Luke parking systems were installed at our Cabrillo East and our Cabrillo West parking lots. That latest group of 5 brings our total Luke systems up to 13 Luke systems in 5 waterfront parking lots, including Harbor West, Garden Street, Chase Palm Park, Cabrillo West, and Cabrillo East. Now, if you'll recall, prior to the Lukes being installed, the primary method of payment, if folks paid, was through the honor fee system. And you'll remember the big clunky boxes that were out there, very antiquated, very labor intensive, not only for a person who was trying to park, who had to do some fancy origami with their dollar bills to shove it in the slots, but also for our parking attendants who would go out there and check the lots and see who had paid and who didn't. And then finally emptying those honor fee boxes, bringing them back to the office, and our accounting staff having to unfold all of those dollar bills. Very time-consuming and often very frustrating. So with this new system, it's very much user-friendly. It's geared towards the user. It's also technologically advanced and technologically very efficient. It accepts both credit cards, debit cards, as well as cash. And we found that since these have been introduced, about approximately 60% of the transactions are by either credit card or debit card. So they are getting a significant amount of use. Of course, that increases our bank fees. But you'll see here that last year what we did in order to gauge how this was helping with our labor, one of our performance objectives was to monitor our Garden Street parking lot and to see what kind of labor savings we received just off that one lot. And after the year was done, we came in and looked at it, and we saved over $27,000 on just that one parking lot as far as labor is concerned. That's how efficient, from a labor standpoint, these Luke systems are. And again, that's just one lot, and one of our less busy lots of the 5 waterfront lots that have those. Now, as far as revenue, the efficiency that we're seeing with these Luke systems with users, as well as change in our parking fee structure, in the first quarter of fiscal year 2014, this July through September, we've seen a 30.5% increase in those 5 parking lots as far as revenue is concerned, and that equates to about $109,000 additional dollars in revenue just out those 5 lots using the Luke system. So it's been a benefit for both parking staff as far as labor is concerned, and on the other end as well, there has been some gain along with the fee increase, a gain in revenues. And that hopefully updates you folks on the Luke system. We look forward to having a complete year with all 13 systems working, and by the end of this fiscal year, we should have those year-long numbers for you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you very much for that report. Any questions? Commissioner Friedman.
I just had a comment. Thank you for that report, Brian. Being that we have that new fence and the pathway from the fence on is it the Chase Palm? Is that the correct lot into the funk zone? The garden lot. It would be good just one that is actually opened and the official kickoff is gone if we just kind of mark that date, because I have a feeling in addition to having the Lukes there that we might see an uptick in revenue in that particular lot. So as we go through the year, whenever that happens, just maybe make a note of it, and then next year you'll be able to, because I have a feeling that that lot's going to get a lot more use, especially as the funk zone and the businesses there are beginning to thrive, and that's one of the closest parking. So.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Friedman, that's a great idea, and it's something we have looked out towards the future if that, in fact, does happen, and there is an access point to the funk zone. One other idea would be also, if you notice when you come into that particular lot, they're located on opposite corners, so it would be a trek for somebody parking over by the funk zone to go back. And so what we'd want to do is encourage people to pay. And so the idea of possibly putting a Luke over in that corner, if that opening does happen in the future, and yeah, we will gauge that.
Commissioner Bantlin.
Thanks, Brian, for the report, and just wanted to give kudos to staff for the implementation of the Luke system. I think we've all been pretty big fans of that since it was first brought to us. And when the county was looking at beach parking fees, I was talking to Scott about how efficient the city model was as far as management costs, and we're just getting that much more efficient. So just want to say thanks.
Any other questions, comments? Commissioner Webb.
Thank you for your report. Does the figure, the 27,000 and the 109,000, is that gross, not including the bank fees?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Webb, yes, that's gross. We have separated the bank fees into another line item, and we were expecting that over the last year and a half. We've seen those bank fees increase, and it's not just us, as you know. A lot of other, whatever the business, there's a whole lot more debit card use, and so those bank fees are increasing. So it does come at a cost, but even when you factor bank fees, labor savings, as well as the increased revenue, we're definitely on the plus. It was a solid decision by the commission.
Anybody else? Thank you very much. On to the facilities management report. Mr. Friedman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Tonight I'm just going to give you a brief update on minor capital improvement projects that were accomplished last year in fiscal year 2013. And I'll start by explaining what a minor capital project is. The city every 2 years puts together a capital improvement plan citywide, all the departments do, and those are defined as projects that cost more than $100,000 and have a useful life of more than 5 years. So those go in the big city master plan, master booklet that's administered by Public Works. These projects often include Public Works oversight and engineering oversight. And examples of those kind of projects, obviously the Marina One project, our parking lot pavement maintenance programs and things like that. The minor capital projects are what we handle more or less in-house. They're less than $100,000, but still have a useful life of more than 5 years. And so that's kind of the definition there between those two types of capital projects. And I'll just give you a couple of examples of those. In the harbor, in your staff report, there's quite an extensive list, but last year in the harbor, we finished installation, staff did, of a solar thermal unit on the Marina 2 restroom building, which now completes all of our restroom buildings have solar thermal units on them to save gas consumption. Staff refurbished the old bike house and repurposed it to be a new home base for UCP Work, Inc., to store their stuff and have an office to work out of. And we installed 7 bike lockers that have a capacity of 2 bicycles each in various locations around the harbor to continue to try and meet the need of bicycling harbor users. As Brian just mentioned, staff installed 5 Luke pay stations in the Cabrillo lots. That was done in-house, and they were solar-powered wireless communications, so they were done very inexpensively because we didn't have to pay for trenching and installing electric lines and communication lines and so forth. Staff redecked 10 Fingers in Marina 2, and we'll look a little bit, some photos of that coming up. And we contracted out remodeling the 119 building restroom, which is the restroom under Brophy Brothers, the public restroom there. And we're going around the harbor, again, restroom by restroom, bringing them up to current ADA standards and the current harbor standard, which if you've seen the Marina 3 restroom, that's kind of the standard that we're looking for. That's what we've got now in the 119 building restroom. It's ADA compliant and much nicer facility and easier to clean and maintain. We did contract that one out. And the wharf projects, there were several there, but we'll talk a little bit more about staff installed 15 fiberglass piled jackets on the wharf, and then the various other items you see in your staff report. And that was done by our dive team in-house. So 25 minor capital improvement projects were identified last year. 22 were accomplished, or 88%, and our performance objective is 80%. So for the last 2 years, we had so many minor capital projects identified, we weren't able to make that performance measure. So this is the first time in 3 years that staff was able to make that 80%. When little things pop up that you don't expect, sometimes you can't quite get all these projects done. And the focus of tonight's presentation that Carl put together before he left on his vacation is work performed over the water, on the water, and under the water. So we'll start off with that. This is an example of work performed over the water, above the water. And this is the water line replacement underneath the city pier. As you can see, we have to set up scaffolding for the safety of the employees. This was done in-house. And not only do we have water lines out there, but there's electrical lines, electrical conduit, and also diesel and gasoline fuel lines. But those lines are maintained by the fuel dock and not our staff. So there's a lot going on under the pier there, and so a lot of work involved in that. But we handled that one in-house. Also, earlier this year, you'll probably remember this slide. This was out on Stearns Wharf. Again, staff set up the scaffolding, and this was contracted out to a painting contractor that did the grinding, prepping, and coating of the steel pile structure under the Ty Warner Sea Center. And, you know, this work is, you have to take into account the tides, the time of year, and the sea conditions that you're expecting, not so much in the harbor, but definitely under Stearns Wharf, or else, you know, you don't do this kind of thing in January or February. You could have your scaffolding wiped out and have to start all over. So next one is an example of projects on the water, and this is the Marina 2 redecking project I just mentioned. This is a dock finger coming out using a special trailer designed and built by staff, so an entire finger can be pulled out of the water and towed over to the maintenance yard and be rebuilt on land, or redecked on land, which is a lot more convenient than doing it on the water. And if you'll note, the deck boards on this finger are parallel to the length of the dock finger. They're running lengthwise on this dock finger. So the next slide shows the dock finger going back in. It looks like they're putting on the rub rails and the finishing touches on that one, and you'll notice that the deck boards are now crosswise, which allows for a much sturdier structure, a better design that we've been going to throughout Marina 2 as we go through these fingers. Another example of projects on the water are we've been going through and incrementally widening the end ties from 4 feet to the current standard of 6 feet. This was contracted out. This is Marina 4B, where the Shearwater moors and the Philippa right now. Yeah, we'll just, that other one's a little blurry. This one's pretty blurry too, but diving under the wharf undercover isn't always the clearest operation. If you can make out the diver with the hydraulic chainsaw, this is cutting off a worn out pile at the mud line. And the divers have hard hat helmets on, surface communications, and cameras on their helmets when they go down there. In this case, he's not surface supplied with air, but we have it both ways, scuba or surface supplied air. Okay, this is kind of an interesting one I'd like to talk a little bit about. Carl's talked in past presentations about these epoxy pile jackets that we've been concentrating on this last year. And you can't drive a pile, obviously, under the buildings on the wharf. And so some of them have been neglected. And so we'd like to show you, here's an example of a wooden pile underneath a building on Stearns Wharf. And if you look, you can see that probably at least half of that pile is missing. It looks like somebody took a big bite out of it. So this enables us to repair that pile without removing it or driving a pile through, say, the Harbor Restaurant or something. And the way they start is by installing these fiberglass ribs, if you will, as a support structure. And then they go in and they wrap the pile with a fiberglass jacket, looks just like our HDPE pile wraps that we do the wood piles with. But in this case, they wrap it to above the water line to the mud line over that rib structure that you saw, and then pour in the epoxy from above the water line, and it goes down and fills those voids, pushes out the water, and cures. And you have a much stronger pile as a result, all filled in with the epoxy and coated with the epoxy. So these cost about $1,100 each, but we've really been focusing on it underneath the buildings, and it's apparently the state of the art in this kind of repair situation. So I guess that's about it. We budgeted $550,000 in fiscal year 2013. We've identified 26 minor CIPs for this fiscal year, some of which are already in progress, of course, at a budget of $625,000, and that funding comes from the facilities operating budget as well as our capital fund, the Harbor Preservation Fund. And that concludes Carl's report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for the report, Scott. And thank you, Carl, if you're watching. Any questions for Commissioner Kelly?
Only because it's very intriguing now that we've seen the description of in pictures how the epoxy jackets work. The real working part of the pile is the one that goes down into the mud. So if we can repair it above, what happens from the mud line down?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Kelly, most of the, below the mud line, it's an oxygen deficit environment. And so the piles they don't corrode very much under the mud line at all. So almost all the corrosion is above the mud line, virtually all of it. So that's why we wrap them just to the mud line and then to above the water line. And in fact, I believe it was this past year or the year before, the way Mission Creek Lagoon eroded out, you could actually see old pile remnants from when the Y of the wharf, the spur on the wharf, went all the way to shore right there by the skateboard park. And we could see them right there in the lagoon sticking up. So they lasted quite a long time under that mud.
Thank you.
Any other Commissioner comments? Thank you for the report. Really interesting. On now to the harbor operations. Mr. Conman.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Tonight, the first couple of items I had could be categorized, I think, as cautionary tales, and then we'll get to some lighter stuff after that. It's come to staff's attention increasingly over the last several years and acutely this summer that some slip permittees are renting, subleasing, or actually using their slips for vacation rentals, which is expressly prohibited both by the marina rules and regulations that slip permittees sign as part of their slip permit assignment, and it's also prohibited by the Municipal Code, Title 17, Section 20005, both of which I've attached to this report. And I wanted to be able to express to the Commission staff's perspective on this and sort of via the Commission begin to get the word out to the boaters and the slip permittees how staff views this. And I'm going to be repeating what I'm telling you tonight in dock lines so that hopefully we get a broad spawn on this concept. But the bottom line is that, you know, the sublet rental or loan of a slip, it's not only a violation of city rules and regulations in the Municipal Code, but it really runs contrary to the stated goals of the Harbor Master Plan, one of which states, and I'm going to quote this for you, "The harbor shall be a working harbor with priority given to ocean-dependent uses such as commercial fishing and recreational boating." That's really what our harbor's for. It's for using it, and it's articulated, as I said, in several places. It is not meant for subletting and renting and loaning your slip or your vessel for those purposes. And the other way to look at it is from the perspective of the 33 people who've been on the master waiting list, who remain on the master waiting list, some of whom have waited there since 1975. And if you look at it through their eyes, if you will, it's not only a misuse of municipally owned berths that are granted to the city by the state to manage, but it's really sort of an affront to the city's efforts, and in particular the department's efforts, to make public berthing available to individuals wishing to utilize for the harbor for the purposes I described. So in summary, we wanted you to know, and we want the boating public to know, that we take this issue quite seriously, and that we are in the process of vigilantly monitoring websites, some obvious, some not so obvious. And when we spot these sublets, it's our intention to pursue them aggressively and leading to quite possibly slip permit termination. This is not a minor mistake or a minor violation in our view. We consider it a major one, given the big picture purpose of the harbor. And so I want to be able to get the word out. I apologize for using you as a conduit, but it's a good one, and to the boaters, and let them know that this really isn't okay. And we are looking for it, and because we respect the state's intentions when they gave us the waterfront to manage, through the state Tidelands grant, and the consequences could be considerable. And in Santa Barbara Harbor, nothing more considerable than losing your slip. So that concludes that item. But the bottom line is we do take it seriously, and we will pursue violations aggressively. The other is a little less heavy, if you will, but it is important. Throughout the summer, we received a lot of complaints about boats speeding in the harbor. And we issued a lot of warnings. We issued very few citations. I think you all know that we're not a badge-heavy organization, but we focus. Boating safety is right up there near the top for all of us, especially the Harbor Patrol group that I manage. And so what I wanted to remind you, respectfully, and the boaters, once again via the commission, is that it's one thing to speed on the ocean when waves attenuate from your vessel out into the open seas and mitigate or become very small very quickly. But in the harbor, actually, there's not only the risk of collision with other vessels or with docks, but the very wake created by a boat. And I've attached both the municipal code language on the speed limit and the municipal code language on creating wakes in the harbor. Can be quite dangerous. If you think about our 100 or so liveaboards, if you're standing at the hot stove with a hot pot of stew and you're about to put dinner on, and somebody wakes the docks pretty heavily, it can be dangerous. And I've noted in the staff report here, in fact, a few years ago, and this was a harbor not far south of us, a 40-foot boat was running in a narrow channel at a high speed, and actually created a wake that knocked persons off the dock and blew docks apart and created some serious damage. So I'll be writing about this in Dock Lines as well. We want to get the message out that to use the old adage that slow is pro, and we want to get folks to slow down, and slowing down will not only prevent accidents, it'll help folks avoid citations or worse yet, harming people. Now, on a much lighter note, I want to remind that the Parade of Lights is right around the corner, December 8th, and we have registration forms at the Harbor Master's office, and the Harbor Market's been kind enough to keep some down there for us. And as usual, it's not really broken, so we expect to have a great affair that mimics festivals parades of the past. It will start again with a Santa's Village at 3 o'clock. That's for the kids. It's, quite frankly, one of my favorite times of the whole event. And where Santa will be there'll be a 10-ton snowfield, and the kids will be playing, and there'll be elves handing out gift bags to the children and what have you. The parade begins at 5:30, followed by a 5-minute fireworks show provided by Bay Fireworks, and of course a lively awards party again this year at the Maritime Museum. We've figured out, and thankfully Greg Gorga, the executive director of the museum, agrees with us, that that's a great model to have people come back into the harbor and they can just walk straight up to the museum for the awards party. It worked wonderfully last year as opposed to years before when we had the awards party off-site at other venues and it was poorly attended or it was difficult for people to get to. So slip permittees will receive an insert in their November billing, which will be a registration form. And as I said, we got them at the Harbor office and down at the Harbor Market. And again, best views for the public who wants to know are on Stearns Wharf and the Breakwater. And we're looking forward to another great year. This will be our 28th year of the Santa Barbara Waterfront's Parade of Lights. The theme, I forgot to tell you, is for those listening, want to start gearing up early, is a rockin' and rollin' holidays. So that's this year's theme, and I'm sure the folks at Costco will love to have the business of folks who want to go out and start buying stuff to decorate their boats. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mick, for the report. The questions from commissioners. Commissioner Sloan.
Thanks for the report, Mick. So what should someone do if they notice that someone on their dock or finger looks like they are renting out their boat or using it in the manner that you mentioned here in the first one? And then secondly, the same thing, what if someone notices somebody speeding in the harbor? What should they do?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Sloan, great question. They can certainly come up and have a discreet meeting with us because, we understand that dock politics and dock culture is, you're living cheek to jowl or operating cheek to jowl down there, and some of these issues are very sensitive, but we would encourage people to come and talk to us, just like we encourage people to come to talk to us when they see illegal liveaboards in the waterfront. We would encourage that. We would try to protect people's anonymity, but what we would end up doing is what we call an FIR, a field investigative report, where officers would, at particular times, pay certain attention in ways that I would be, ill-advised to describe here, to find out if what is being reported to us is in fact true. Same goes for speeding. If somebody sees somebody speeding through the harbor, and by the time they get to us, they say, we saw Joe on the Betty Lou 2 speeding through the harbor, we'll go down and contact Joe, and we won't cite him because, unless this person is willing to sign a cite, which is pretty unusual. It's difficult to prove in court, too, but we go down and we'll counsel Joe, and we'll talk to him and talk to him about the very same things I spoke with you folks about tonight, and try to get him to remember to slow down when they hit the jaws of the breakwater. Some folks come in so fast that even when they pull back on the throttles, the wake they cause, and they're still kind of roaring when they're halfway through the harbor, and that starts sending the boats rocking in Marina 4 and the easterly end of Marina 1. So that's the way we'd handle it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Spicer.
Mick, thank you for the report. I'm going to familiarize myself with rule number 17 there on the first one, but I want to make sure. So the staff has found evidence that somebody is advertising their boat or their slip out as a rental, and it also you state loans as well, meaning they can't allow someone to just take their slip or boat as a gesture.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Spicer, the answer to both is yes. It came to our attention that an individual was actually advertising on a website that this individual was using his vessel and slip as a vacation rental. We had a long discussion with this individual, and he's very lucky that he's not here before you tonight appealing his slip permit termination. I'll just say that, okay? And the same is true for a loan. The slip is a rental. It's a month-to-month lease with the city of Santa Barbara. It's municipally owned property, if you want to look at it that way. It's water space. For boaters, the best way to think about it, it's a parking spot. You're basically renting a place to park your vessel. And to turn around and use that for monetary advantage is not only inappropriate, it's in fact illegal.
Thank you. And putting it in the parking terms, I think, rings loudly with a lot of people in the harbor community. Thank you.
No doubt.
Other questions, comments, commissioners? Thank you for the report, Mick. All right. On now to new business. And agenda item number 6, the amendment to lease agreement with the Richones Incorporated, doing business as Chuck's Waterfront Grill. Jeanette, would you read the staff recommendation, please?
Sure. Amendment to lease agreement with Rich Ones, Inc., doing business as Chuck's Waterfront Grill. Recommendation that Harbor Commission recommend City Council approve amendment number 1 to lease number 23328 with Rich Ones, Inc., doing business as Chuck's Waterfront Grill for office space located at 113 Harbor Way, number 145 and number 150.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. In June of this year, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration relocated their local Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary offices to a new building out at UC Santa Barbara. As part of that move, they kept 2 offices, but reduced their overall office footprint from about 1,472 square feet to 452 square feet. The result was 1,020 square feet that would be available for lease. The current Chuck's Waterfront Grill lease has the tenant as a first right of refusal to any leasable space that becomes available in the waterfront center. Noting this, and staff provided a viewing of the space to one of Chuck's owners, Mr. Steve Hislop, who shortly after the viewing of the available office space and a discussion with the co-owner, another co-owner, they decided to lease the entire 1,020 square feet at a rate of $2.47 per square feet, which is the same rate they pay for their restaurant space. Now, the square footage will be added to their restaurant lease, and in addition, that square footage will also be added to their common area maintenance charges, or CAM charges. So the remainder of the lease is the same. This will be tacked on to their existing lease, which has 27 years remaining on it if they exercise all their options, which takes it out to 2040. They will pay an average base rent of $20,890, and that's adjusted seasonally. They continue to pay percentage rent at 10% of gross sales, or the base rent, whichever is greater, and that percentage escalates to 11% when they reach the $3 million mark, which they do quite frequently. And they will have annual rent adjustments in accordance with the Consumer Price Index. So that is the latest on lease amendment number 1 for Chuck's Waterfront Grill, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Commissioner Sloan.
Thank you, Brian. Doesn't 27 years seem a little long for office space? I understand they have the restaurant, and they did the leasehold improvements, if I remember correctly, to build the patio glass walls, but this seems a little long just for the office. I don't know.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Sloan, it is a long time, but in accordance with the lease, it just gets lumped on to their existing restaurant lease, which is that a number of renewal options, but if they were to exercise all those in 27 years remaining on it.
Oh, that's the lease plus all the extensions?
That's correct.
What's the base lease? Is it 10 years or 15 years? 15?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Sloan, it's a series of 5-year options, 5 years at a time. And the way that it's a unique lease that has this right of first refusal provision in it for any space that becomes available in the waterfront center building. And it's quite specific in that it says if any space becomes available, it'll just be added directly to the lease space that they already have and the term and everything. So it is a long time for an office space who would never ordinarily do that, but it's just the way it was written in the
master lease, so
yes.
It had the right of first refusal in there.
Correct.
And then when you calculate their percentage rent, does this get lumped into that?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Sloan, that's accurate. Yes, it does.
Okay, so it raises the base, basically.
Raises the base rent only.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Commissioner Bantlin.
And then just to add to that, the $247 a square foot, we're never really hitting base. I mean, we're usually always going on the percentage rent, correct? On the 10 or 11, depending on their sales.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Bantlin, that's correct.
Okay, just want to make sure. Thanks.
Any other questions, comments? And could I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. On to the commission staff communications. Does staff have? Do we have?
Madam Chair, I'd just like to add that last month Kathy McCammon was here to talk about her Coastal Treasures adult ed program, and Wednesday before this, Mick and I and yourself joined Greg Gorga from the Maritime Museum, and we had a nice little panel discussion at the SBCC Adult Education Program. There's quite a bit of audience participation. I think we had about 20 people in the room, and it went really well, I think. So I just want to let you know that we followed through with that one.
I agree, it went very well. Commissioner Sloan?
Unfortunately, I wasn't here last weekend. How did the Harbor Festival go?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Sloan, it was the largest harbor festival we've had to date. We started counting 3 years ago with 13,800 counted with clickers at pinch points entering into the area. Last year we had 14,100 and we had 14,600 this year. But it went very smoothly, I think in a lot of ways, smoother in some ways than other years. It didn't seem to me to be quite as congested in the right around the barbecue area and the Sushi Go-Go area. The music was great. We had a new band this year, and actually Commissioners Friedman and Bantlin got to roll up their sleeves and help us out in the albacore crab tent. So that was a nice experience too. You're invited next year to help us out with that.
Here I would.
Well, great.
Commissioner
Well,
Friedman.
since we're on the Harbor Festival, first I want to thank all the staff and all our fishermen and everyone who made it a great success. It's one of my favorite festivals, and it's fast becoming my favorite. One thing I really enjoy is that I get to gross my family out by eating an uni right off the dock, and they can't do anything about it. They're there, so. But it's a great festival, and I think one of the important things about it is that, similar to farmers markets where we're going to buy from our local farmers, this is one of the only opportunities where we actually celebrate our local fishing industry, and it's such an important industry, and I think we lose sight of that it is a working harbor, like you mentioned earlier, and it's an opportunity for the public. There's a lot of tourists, but there's also a lot of locals that come down, and they actually get to meet our fishermen and have that interaction with them. So I think it brings that whole sustainable food system forward. And I also had a great time serving out the albacore. I didn't eat breakfast in the morning, so that hour or so that I was plating it out, my stomach was growling because it's one of the best pieces of fish that you get all year, and I highly encourage everyone next year to come out and get it. With that being said, there's a couple issues that I wanted to bring up, and I know it's not agendized, so this will probably have to come back at another time. But one was I noticed it a couple times, and I had a couple people mention this to me, that there were people walking around with alcohol containers, and so I noticed it. They were cans of alcohol, and so I just wanted to understand more. What that process is, because I believe that it is sold at the. Is it sold at the market? Beer? That's what I saw. And if during the festival you can do that, because as other festivals, I know there's certain areas that if you want to do that, you need to get roped off, so just something to consider in the future as it grows. And then another issue that I thought about is I've been going the last five years or so, and it has gotten better and bigger and more crowded every year, and there's. Unlike other festivals such as in Oak Park or even down in Carpinteria with Avocado Festival, there really isn't room to expand once you hit a capacity, or you have to get creative to expand it just based on the configuration of where it is. So I thought it might be a good idea to understand the costs involved with putting this on and possibly doing a 2-day festival in the future as it gets more, I see some eyes rolling there, but which is why I want this to come back at a later time, is understanding just what are the costs involved, what is the staff time involved, but also what is the how does it affect the businesses there as well? Because if it's some festivals, when you have a festival, the businesses are impacted negatively, but others it brings in a lot of additional customers, and they can have great days. So if there is a boom to our local businesses. During that in the water, it'd be worth understanding that. So, again, this isn't agendized, so we can't really talk about that tonight, but I was hoping to bring that back, just a better understanding of how the festival works, what the staff time is involved, and have a discussion on possibly doing a 2-day, because I think that might be a way to have a large festival, but also allow locals to also enjoy it as well. The example I'm going to use is the Carpentry Avocado Festival. It's grown exponentially over the last 20 plus years, and they now have a day. The first day is really for locals on that Friday, and so that could be a good model for us. And I know there's a lot of drawbacks, but again, if we could consider that at a future meeting as an agendas item.
Commissioner Friedman, the festival is after the cutoff date for this month's agenda, but we plan on bringing you a report next month on the festival.
Commissioner Bantolin.
I just want to echo Commissioner Friedman's comments. I had a great time, excuse me, down at the festival this year, and we talked a little bit earlier today about the idea of a 2-day, and so I think it would be good to get some of our hard costs and soft costs and just some ideas. You know, he mentioned like a locals kind of day. I know the Avocado Festival also has a little competition on the biggest avocado, and then it's auctioned off. Maybe we could do something with lobster, or come up with a few different things. I think we do a great job. Obviously, our attendance is up. I saw a lot more tourists this year. I don't know if that's because of all the tour buses. I don't know if we could coordinate a cruise ship. I think those are usually on weekdays. But just some other ideas. I think if you guys could come back next month, it would be great. So thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Webb.
I would also just like to thank staff for their seamless setting up and takedown. By Saturday night, it was like it was never there. You do a great job, and it was a great festival, and everyone had fun. People were lined up all the way down the breakwater eating lobster. They went out to the beach with chairs, and it was a really the good stuff about the harbor and the community. Very good. So, however you continue it, keep on. Thanks.
I'd like to add one final thing. I know Mick is probably too shy to mention this, but I think they want to show his book, apropos of fishing, Fishermen in the Harbor, and it's I haven't read all of it yet, but it's really, really good, and I believe it's available at the Maritime Museum. So that's...
Mick's known for being shy.
Yeah, and there's actually there's a picture of him here for it's. I have a motion to adjourn on that note.
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Yeah. This meeting is adjourned.